Hey guys, it's Miss Aguero here. Thank you for tuning in to this video. In this video, we're going to be talking about simplifying radicals, specifically simplifying square roots. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we can simplify radicals, we need to be able to be familiar with the different parts of a radical. The nth root of a real number a can be written as the radical expression, the nth root of a. This symbol right here, this is the radical symbol. The number underneath the radical symbol is called the radicand, so a is the radicand, and then the number on the outside, the root, that's called the index. So if there's no index, it is assumed that it is a 2. If you look at the little star on the top right corner, this is an example of a cube root. We're taking the cube root of 27. Let's look at some perfect squares, some perfect cubes, and some perfect fourths. These are called perfect because if I square, for example, if I square 1 squared, I get 1. It's a perfect square. If I square 2 squared, 2 times 2 is 4. It's a perfect square. And these perfect squares are going to help us simplify square roots. In this video, we're only focusing on square roots, so we're going to focus on perfect squares. You do not have to memorize these. However, memorizing these will help you break down perfect squares. Let's take a look at some examples. Number 1, we're going to simplify the square root of 16. 16 is a perfect square. That means that we don't have to do any work. The square root of 16 is 4 because 4 times 4 is 16. That's a perfect square. Whenever we're taking the square root, we're looking to see, is there a whole number that I can multiply by itself to get the radicand 16? And in this case, there is. It's 4. So the square root of 16 is 4. And that is my answer. I'm going to have these perfect squares out to the side to help us break down these radicals. Number 2, the square root of 27. Now, this one is not a perfect square. That means I'm going to have to use perfect squares to break it down. So I'm looking at 27 and I'm saying, what are the factors of 27? Well, I know 1 times 27 is 27. I also know that 3 times 9 is 27. So out of these factors, I'm looking to see which ones are perfect square. And I'm looking to see which one's the largest perfect square. And it looks like 9 is the largest perfect square because the square root of 9 is 3. So I'm going to use 3 and 9. And I'm going to rewrite the square root of 27 as the square root of 9. Square root of 9 times the square root of 3. Now this is going to help me because I can break down the square root of 9 as 3. So my answer is 3 square root of 3. And that is it. Number 3, the square root of 32. Again, I'm going to look for factors of 32 and I'm going to see if any of them are perfect squares. So the factors of 32 are 1 and 32. What else? 2 and 16. And 4 and 8. So what is my largest perfect square? 16. So I'm going to use 2 and 16. And I'm going to rewrite the square root of 32 as the square root of 16. Oops, let me get the right color here. Square root of 16 times the square root of 2. And I'm writing the square root, the perfect square, first because I know I can break that down. Square root of 16 is 4. So that means my answer is 4 square root of 2. And that is it. Let's look at some examples that have larger numbers. The square root of 117. This is a larger number, so let's see. What are the factors of 117? 1 times 117, 3 times 39, 9 times 13. Again, you can always use your calculator to find the factors, especially when the numbers are large. Which one of these factors are perfect squares? I see 9. 9 is a perfect square. 1 is always a perfect square. However, 1 doesn't really help us break down 117. So I'm going to use 9 and 13, and I'm going to rewrite the square root of 117 as the square root of 9. Let me get the right pen here. Square root of 9 times the square root of 13. Well, what is the square root of 9? 3. So that means this is 3 square root of 13. And that is my answer. Number 5, square root of 300. 300 is a larger number, so that means I'm going to have a lot more factors. What are the factors of 300? 1 in 300. 2 in 150. I'm looking to see which ones are perfect squares. I see 100. 1 is always a perfect square. Again, we're not going to use 1. I see 100. I also see 25. Which one's the largest? Well, it's 100. So I'm going to use 3 times 100. And I'm going to rewrite the square root of 300 as the square root of 100 times the square root of 3. The square root of 100 is 10, so my answer is 10 square root of 3. Now we are going to take a look at 2 more examples. In these examples, you do have coefficients in front of the radicals. So whenever this happens, you still need to simplify the radical first, and then we're going to multiply the coefficient by our answer. Number 6, negative 8 square root of 63. I'm going to break down the square root of 63 first. What are the factors of 63? 1 times 63 and 7 times 9. So I see a perfect square, 9, so I'm going to rewrite the square root of 63 as the square root of 9 times the square root of 7. So square root, let me get the right pen here, square root of 9 times the square root of 7. The coefficient, I'm just going to bring that down, okay, so, and I'm going to multiply by whatever I get here. So negative 8, I just bring that down. Well, what is the square root of 9? The square root of 9 is 3. So that means this is negative 8 times 3 times the square root of 7. Negative 8 times 3 is 24. Negative 24 square root of 7 is my answer. Number 7, 4 square root of 320. 320 is a large number as well. What are the factors of 320? 1 times 320. 2 and 160. 4 and 80. What else? 5 and 64. 8 and 40. 10, 32. And 16 and 20. So again, I'm looking for any factors that are perfect square. I see 64 is a perfect square, 1's a perfect square. Which one's the largest? 64. So I'm going to use 5 and 64. I can rewrite the square root of 320 as the square root of 64 times the square root of 5. Again, I'm bringing down my coefficient 4 out in front because I'm going to multiply that. So the square root of 64 is 8. So this becomes 4 times 8 times the square root of 5. 4 times 8 is 32, so this is 32 square root of 5. And that is my answer.